Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your host Idris Khamisa, and welcome to our program Inspirate Life. I said this a number of times. I cannot thank Allah enough that in my travels in many parts of the world, I meet some of the most beautiful souls, and these souls have enriched my life and they continue to enrich me. Our next guest is one such soul. As a very, very brief introduction because her CV is so impressive, and I will not do justice to it if I were to go through every item in the CV. She is Sister Amina Huti. She is an anthropologist, an author, a person that has won many awards. She's involved with so many initiatives. She does interfaith dialogue, and she travels, and in her travels, she expresses what she sees. And so the topic that we have chosen today is called building bridges. Before we talk about it, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum to you, my beloved sister, Dr. Amina.
Wa alaikum assalam, my brother. Thank you for your warm introduction. And it's a pleasure to be on your channel. May this channel inspire, educate, and light up. And may we connect in many, many ways to
Ameen.
all the wonderful brothers and sisters out there.
Ameen. Ameen. Okay, I want to begin. You have chosen this topic, building bridges, and I want you to share with us the genesis of the work that you did. I remember when you were launching the book, I also was part of the webinar, and I was so touched by some of the moving stories that you shared. So, could you give us a little background, please?
Yes. My brother, I come from South Asia, a region, especially in Pakistan, where the culture and community consists of a very rich and diverse background. So they're people from different faiths and ethnicities living together. They're Muslims and Christians and Jews and Baha'is and Buddhists and people of all faiths and the Kalasha. And my own father, who tells us his stories of the partition between Pakistan and India, tells us of terrible times of war and destruction and how bad that impact was on little kids. He was a 4-year-old when he migrated, when this partition happened. So the effects of war are so terrible. In contrast to that, we want and strive to do peace building. And he has always encouraged me as his child, as a scholar, as an academic. He's a fellow academic and scholar. He's done a lot of writing and work on this. And he's always said, please focus on this. And I always discuss ideas with him. So it's great to have that mentor and father friend who can guide and take you forward. And that is the ideal in a family. So the idea of building bridges is something very dear to me because I come from that background. It's generational, so it's in the family where we're striving to live in different communities and to give voice and to reach out to build bridges. And we've done that in a number of ways, which I'd like to maybe explore later with you.
Yeah, when you were chatting, there's one thing that resonates with me, and it is through you. I mean, I've read some of the works of your beloved father. I really find him to be an intellectual person with tremendous foresight. And the love you have for him and the love he has for you is worthy of the highest emulation. How I wish that families can be as cohesive like your good self. The thing that I want to ask you is this, and sometimes we have a tendency sometimes as Muslims to be insular and isolationist. And our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam came as a mercy unto all mankind. And does that inspire you and drive you to do what you are doing?
That's a very beautiful point, my brother, you've raised, because our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to challenge the tribal system. He was inclusive, so he brought everybody in. He reached out to different communities, to different faiths, and tried to bring them into his fold. So he wasn't exclusivist, he was inclusive. As all the saints and all the prophets and all the heroes are, they're really global citizens. So anyone can reach out to them, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu. Anyone can look at their character and say, wow, look at that character. That's someone who inspires me. And he had a very close relationship with his daughter, Fatima, peace be upon them. And Fatima had a very difficult life. She had a lot of challenges at home, but he was always very supportive as a father, as a guide, as a friend. And she herself is a role model for many people around the world, and especially for Muslims.
Yeah, you know, the whole idea is the world will be a far more peaceful place when there is convergence. And, sometimes there are those critiques that make scathing attacks, as it were, on interfaith dialogue. The notion that we want to dilute our faith so that others accept us. And I know from my experience and knowledge of you, you are deeply and profoundly a Muslim, but you do not, for example, subscribe to a notion that we must live in isolation. And I think that's an important thing I get whenever I engage with you.
Yes, my brother, it's approaching the subject from your own perspective. So you have different layers. You could be, for example, Muslim. You could, for example, I personally am very inspired by the Prophet, by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by his family, by Bibi Fatima, by Bibi Khatija, by Bibi Aisha, Bibi Zainab. They're such role models for us, because here were people who had that balance, the balance between, the mizan that Rabbi describes in the Quran, the balance of deen and dunya. So yes, they were traders, they were active in their community, they were helping, they were reaching out, and at the same time, they were very deeply spiritual. And that's something very inspiring, because this world is a difficult journey. And how do you keep that balance while contributing to society, while being positive, while doing that righteousness that beloved Rabbi always talks about? He always says, yes, believe, but do righteousness. So approach the subject from that stand. So you have a firm root in your own identity, but you're always inclusive. You see other human beings, whether they're Muslims or people of other faith, as brothers and sisters in humanity. And in fact, the Quran Sharif itself, again and again, talks about this. And I'd like to go here, my brother, with to quote a little dedication for you on this program of yours. This is a little book that I wrote. It's called Gems and Jewels, The Religions of Pakistan.
Alhamdulillah.
And the dedication is to beloved Rabbi, the creator of the universe. And I'd like to read out the dedication here. It says, this book is dedicated to the deeply beloved who created the nations and tribes of the earth, that they may know one another. From them come those whom the scholars and saints call gems and jewels. And this is, as you know, it's based in the holy texts. This quote to reach out to the nations and tribes. So, yes, I think the problem comes when we become culturally Muslim, but we're not universal, because Islam, or all of the faiths that Rabbi talks about and Rabbi explores, and he has revealed his reflection through the different prophets that he's revealed, and we must all love them all and be inclusive. And he talks again about the concept of being righteous, about reaching out, about doing good for humanity. And how can we be that little, just that little lamp or the little light that can help others around us?
Yes, brothers and sisters, this is the first session. It's almost over. Inshallah, in the second session, I would like you to share the number of experiences that you had, and I'm sure those experiences would enlighten us and inspire us, inshallah, to do what is right. We'll be back immediately after this break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am really enjoying this conversation with my beloved sister, Dr. Amine Hoti, who is now in the UK, and she is an anthropologist, an author. She is a woman of many, many parts, and really, what an inspiration to us as human beings on this earth to meet someone that is so caring, so loving. And when she speaks, Alhamdulillah, she exudes a lot of that warmth. So, my beloved sister, I would like you, to talk to us about your journey writing the book and some of those experiences that have left an indelible impression. And I would recommend, inshallah, to our viewers to buy that book, Gems and Jewels. And I think the title is so appropriate. Gems and jewels are not there. You find it everywhere. You got to look for it. And when you look for it, when you find them, you will never forget that at all.
Thank you, brother. The book has a foreword by Prince Hassan of Jordan, and he's talked about the diversity of human beings, of the human family. So that's a lovely foreword that's worth reading. In the book, I've talked about the religions which are the least in population first. So I've talked about the Jains, Zoroastrians, the Kalasha, the Jews, Buddhists, Baha'is, Sikhs, Christians, Hindus. And because Muslims are the largest population in Pakistan, I've mentioned them in a sense of respect or adab. We have a great culture of respect. So we say pehle aap. We always say you first. And that was the traditional culture, the local culture, where you give importance to people who are less in number or less privileged or smaller, and therefore you put them forward first. But while doing this book, my brother, I had the privilege of reading some really beautiful books, including the Shah Jo Risalo, written by Shah Abdul Latif Bhetai of Sindh, for example. They're beautiful stories. Then I read Hir Ranja's Waris Shah. And then there are wonderful saints in Swat like Seydou Baba, and wonderful people throughout. There's Baba Guru Nanak and all the absolutely inspiring stories from that region. And in these stories, the woman in all of these stories is the protagonist. So she's the one who is the main character, and her journey to her beloved is the journey of a believer to the goal or destination. For example, all these people are symbolic, says Shah Abdul Latif Bhetai, who's the author. He says that the girl who is um, in love with the boy is the symbol for the believer. So she's like in ishq with Allah, for example, or Rasulallah. So this is a journey, the journey of life. But the journey is very difficult because life is difficult. So often she is deceived. For example, in Soni Mahiwal, the story, the woman has to cross over the river, and the river is very dangerous and very treacherous. And in the river, there are crocodiles and snakes. And the thing that she relies on, because she cannot swim, so to cross over, she has to have her little pot, and the pot is decorated in a worldly fashion. And that is symbolic for the world. Her journey through that river is the journey through life. And she is the symbol for the believer. Her love is the symbol for the prophet or the divine. But her characteristics through this journey are that of determination, of striving, of staying firm on the path. And Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai, the author, who was a very spiritual saint, he is supposed to be the embodiment of Maulana Rumi in South Asia, according to some authors. And he's also known as the Shakespeare of Sindh, of Pakistan, of that region, of the subcontinent. So he's a very special Muslim figure. And he tells us this beautiful story, as do so many other saints that I came across in this book. And through writing this book, I was able to learn these stories about my own faith, and which really inspired me because these are stories not of exclusion, that I am right, you are wrong, but it's a story of inclusion. So Shah Abdul Latif quotes not only the Quran, he says these verses are, my stories are to educate you. They are like stories from the holy texts. But also he quotes from the other holy texts, the other books that were revealed by beloved God. And he is very inclusive of all the communities of South Asia. So he again and again quotes them, he includes them in his stories. And these are lovely stories to inspire our young generation and also our religious scholars and the community more widely. So I would love to see these stories played out and taught in universities.
Okay, there are few things that resonate with me. I know you also, and also feel strongly about it, that our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave a woman a dignity, yet there is a notion that we tend to marginalize them, we tend to squelch the creativity, we tend to stifle them, we don't give them an opportunity to blossom and play their role in society. And does that thought resonate with you?
Yes, my brother, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave a lot of rights to women in his time. It was a period of jahiliyyah, of ignorance. So women were mistreated. It was a misogynistic context and society. Men made all the decisions and kept women locked up in homes. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it's the believer's right, whether you're man or woman, even to go to China from from Arabia at that time, which was a long journey to go and seek knowledge. So the point was that knowledge is central in Islam for all human beings. It's not whether you're a man or a woman. And in fact, there were many civilizations, for example, in the period of Spain, Muslim Spain, Al Andalus, when women were teachers and scholars at universities, and many men were sitting around learning from women. So, not just these civilizations, but these again inspire so many other people. And we hear so many stories of scholars. We see the beautiful mosque of Al Karawin in Fez, which was again sponsored and supported by a woman, Fatima Al Fihri.
Hmm.
And so you have these wonderful examples, but you've also, again, if you go to the root, you see beloved God constantly saying that, we've given um, respect to men and to women, and we've given them the ability to think. So he constantly refers to human beings as ahle aql, O people of thought. He doesn't say, O men of thought. He says, O people of thought, which means knowledge, education is really encouraged for both men and women. And in fact, one of the largest Muslim society countries is Pakistan. The founding father, who is Muhammad Ali Jinnah, repeatedly encouraged education for both men and for women. And he kept saying, open up schools and universities for men and women, and he said, go to your mosques and to your temples, respect men and women, not only of your faith, but of all faith communities.
Okay, Alhamdulillah, Jazakumullah for that. Our overarching theme for this presentation is building bridges, and that comes from your anecdotes, your experiences, writing that book, traveling the length and breadth of Pakistan. And if you were to do a critique of this world, do you not think perhaps, there is a tendency for us to isolate ourselves, not to engage with the other, and so that people have either a jaundiced view of Islam or they are completely, we Muslims are completely misunderstood. How important is it for us to reach out to our neighbor who is not a Muslim, to reach out to other communities? Because inshallah, when we reach out to them, they'll begin to see the beauty of this faith.
Very good point. Very good question. It's very important for the world to see the real face of Islam and not the face that we want to see through a problematic lens. Because the real face of Islam is about improving the world, it's about justice, it's about equality, it's about knowledge, seeking knowledge, it's about loving humanity and all of humanity. It's about loving the beloved, the creator. So there's nothing wrong in that. There's nothing bad in that. It's all positive. So that's very important for people who are perceiving Islam from the outside to appreciate that it is beneficial for them and for the world. And for Muslims themselves, they have to have a sense of pride in who they are. But you cannot have a pride until you know who you are. So, in order to know who you are, you've got to go back to the root. Read the Quran Sharif properly with meaning, with an open mind. Read the hadiths, read the biographies of all the khalifas, of the prophets if you can. Read wider knowledge, engage in dialogue with people of your own faith and other faiths. And I think the key here, my brother, is not to point fingers to other people. Don't say, oh, this religion, that person, this neighbor, this family member is wrong, but try to improve your own self. Try to do the journey within your own soul. Because the biggest battle is to improve your own self. Human beings have so many challenges, greed, consumerism, temptation today in today's world. So how do I improve my own self? How do I guide my children? These are the key questions. How do I contribute to the society I am living in a positive way to help the society? So I cannot, if I'm busy in that huge battle, I cannot be saying, oh, this nation is bad, I'm good. My neighbor is bad, I'm good. My family member, fighting with them. That's not possible because that's a completely different toxic battle.
You know what,
So we have to
Sister,
refocus.
I sorry, because they have their breaks and adverts and all that, and inshallah we'll be back immediately after this break. And the point that you make is the example is better than precept. So Alhamdulillah, we're having a riveting conversation with Dr. Amina Hote. Alhamdulillah, she's sharing with us her experiences writing the book Gems and Jewels. We'll be back immediately after this break. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. And we are watching this program, Inspirate Life. Again, as I said in my introduction, that, I cannot thank Allah enough. I meet such wonderful luminaries like our guest, Dr. Amine Hoti. Sister, we are chatting about the book, and you shared that one experience. Now, what are the experiences that you have? What are the experiences that you have gone through that can illustrate the idea about building bridges and how those experiences perhaps has enriched you?
Yes. So while writing the book, my brother, I came across many communities. I was able to discover the inclusive, the beautiful, bringing together the building bridges perspective of my own faith, which is Islam. But I was also able to hear and listen to other perspectives. So I was able to learn about Baba Guru Nanak from the Sikh faith, who was again brought up in Pakistan. And he loved people of all faiths. He loved Muslims, he loved Hindus. And in fact, he even went to perform Hajj. So these wonderful stories of him reaching out to the poor, to the needy. There's stories of from the religion Zoroastrianism or the Parsi faith, where their prophet went to up to the cave and meditated and challenged the tyranny of its time. And that reminded me of Rasulullah when he went to Ghar Hira and he secluded himself. Then I came across the story of Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who was again a very inspirational figure. He was a prince and he had a beautiful wife, he had a beautiful child. He left them and went and sat under a tree to ask these big questions because he saw suffering and pain in the earth. So, all these stories, my brother, which I was coming across, as a Muslim believer was not narrowing my picture, my perspective. It wasn't watering down my faith. I was falling more and more in love with the beloved because he's made this beautiful earth, and he said again in the Quran Sharif, he says again and again that I've made nations and tribes so that you may know one another. And my subject of anthropology, social anthropology, which is one of the social sciences, is about knowing each other. It's about knowing communities. It's about going and exploring and living amongst them. So I had this great privilege to go and not just live in Pakistan, but to explore from really the north to the south. For example, we traveled 17 hours in the car on a very bumpy road and sometimes dangerous road to go and live with the Kalasha. So I was talking about the diversity of Pakistan and our journey through these different communities, and how for me as a believer, as someone who really wants to improve the world and at least make a little bit of a difference, um, or be a little bit of a positive, and how to help as someone who loves humanity or someone who loves beloved Allah. And for me to encounter that Kalasha community where we stayed in the north of Pakistan and the freezing cold, it was snowing and it was really cold, but to encounter their homes and their communities, their families, it was really a wonderful experience. So I think for Muslims, it's important to reach out. It's important to hold that hand. And I think that is sunnat, in fact. It's the way of the Prophet, it's the way of our text, our holy text, where God keeps saying, I made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another, so that you may learn from each other, so that you may expand, because there's so many different roads to the beloved. And the beloved does love all of his humanity. It's like when a mother has many children, you're not going to discriminate, you're going to try to encourage them, but they all have the path is to you, to beloved God.
You see, one of the things a person listening to this program would say that you went out of your way to reach out, and the experiences have been very, very positive. Now, how do you then reconcile the fact that there is so much of, at the moment, antipathy towards Islam, Islamophobia, and all of these things? How do you reconcile that? Because I'm sure And from your book, in the impression I get is that you have extracted many universal values, and it has in fact strengthened your own conviction about Islam. So how do you reconcile that? The antipathy, perhaps the followers not having a proper understanding of the people that founded their own faiths, as it were, and why there is this kind of hostility.
Yes, when I was reading the books of the saints and reading the biographies of the Khalifas, one of the points that strikes me really, it's very prominent, is where the beloved says, "You're the Khalifa." God made each human being as a representative of God. Can you imagine that status? It's just so full of responsibility. And so, to be in that position, one has to educate themselves, one has to engage, one has to be respectful of the people around them, of your own faith, which has so many positives to offer. And the way to do that is through knowledge, it's through faith, it's through being a dignified representative of your own community, but also conveying that articulately to the world. Because if we are just so busy in our day to day lives and we don't have time to dedicate, then there is going to be a gap. And I think there is this huge gap. There is a huge problem of Islamophobia, the brunt of which is faced by young people, and especially young Muslims living in Muslim communities, but also in the rest of the world. So, how do they face their peers or their friends when they see awful things on the media? They have to do that through learning much more about themselves. Religious scholars have to come up and maybe engage much more. Maybe more academics could do work that encourages little strands of, for example, what I've done in my work. I've taken anthropology, which is my subject. I've taken faith. I've taken the idea of goodwill, which is from, the United Nations, human rights. But that all, like you say, my brother, has strengthened me and my faith in the beloved. So I'm very much, I just feel very strong or strengthened by the idea that, if you can work towards reaching out, work towards different communities, different faiths, and understand them and put together programs where we include students. So I've done that in some of my work. For example, when I was teaching in some of the universities in Pakistan or in Doha at Georgetown, or even in the West, for example, in the United Kingdom or in America, and I was asked to talk about either minority rights or women's rights, what I would do is I would go back to the Shah Jo Risalo, the saint, the Shah Abdul Latif Bitai, who wrote this beautiful book. I would take a play from his book and then make the students enact that. So in this play, it's got all the values. It's got respect for women, it's got respect for your faith, it's respect for humanity, it's doing good, it's staying straight and firm on the path as much as humanly possible. All those same values and nuggets are there.
You know,
But it's how we approach it.
okay. In the time time is going so fast. The third segment is nearly over, but just an important thing. When I look at you, when I look at the things that you love, you are an avid reader. You want to learn, and I want you to apply your mind to this one particular question. That when you went up to these groups in Pakistan, people of other faiths, was there any skepticism on their part? And in the end, when you engage with them in your, alhamdulillah, in your very pleasant disposition that you have, what were some of those responses on their part? Did they, for example, look at you differently? Did they look at Islam differently? Did it create a kind of awareness and say, my gosh, if people like you uh, uh, are the followers of the faith of Islam, the follower of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we also need to get to know your Prophet, your Creator. So I want you to think about that, and we will continue immediately after this break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi barakatuh. We are having a conversation with one of my favorite people, Dr. Amine Houti, a anthropologist, a lecturer, an author, a woman, as I said, of many parts. My beloved sister, coming back to the earlier question I asked you, I'm sure you must have gotten feedback from the individuals you were speaking to. Uh, are there any things that they have said that is etched in your memory that has left an indelible impression?
You asked a good question, my brother, before the break. I would say that humanity, in its origin, having encountered all these different communities, is very warm. I got a very warm and welcoming reception. And all of them wanted to open up. But also at the same time, there was a lot of dard, there was a lot of pain. And that was unexplored. So, an opportunity like this, where a scholar, where a female, where a mother comes and says, I want to hear your story, it's also psychological. You want to open up, you want to tell your achievements, you want to tell your problems, you want to share your burden. And that sharing was a sort of bonding. So through the book, I heard stories, I was able to write, but some of these people became very dear friends and very respected in my heart. And they are very precious people. It made me realize that although the image of Pakistan, very specifically, and the Muslim community more generally, is very black and white, and there's a lot of Islamophobia globally, unfortunately. But in reality, there's so much complexity on the ground, there's so much nuance, there's so much diversity, there's so much humanity. And that you can only see through these stories, through personal encounter, through going down to the ground and hearing women and mothers and men with their challenges and little children, and you see them in action. And then you say, wow, these are the beautiful colors of humanity. Here are the nations and tribes that beloved Rabbi talks about in his holy texts, in the Quran Sharif, and where Rasulullah constantly reached out in his lifetime. Remember, he was in Makkah, he had terrible challenges, his life was threatened. He had to leave and go to Medina. And so he had to travel. He sent out many ambassadors. He sent out a beautiful letter that protected the lives, the monasteries of people of the Christian faith. He reached out again to different communities, to the Jewish community. So again, he was a true ambassador. He was a true person who did not have the arrogance of being insular, but he had the magnanimity or the beautiful, azim or shan Rasul, like they say, the dignity of reaching out to different communities. And I think it's hard initially because you don't know what's behind, or you don't know what you will encounter. But once you do reach out, you can create many beautiful links, beautiful friendships, beautiful connections. And I think that's something very, very special. So, like they say, you live one life in this world. You have the opportunity to educate yourself, to read about your own faith, to learn much more, but also to reach out to your neighbors, to your communities. Maybe it's when it's your Eid or Ramzan, pack a little food and pass it on and share your joy. Share the joy of living, share the joy of your faith, share the joy of humanity, of a world civilization. And when we get out of our own gham or the pain, and this is what I saw in the book, that so many communities were suffering or had challenges and difficulties. But when they were able to step out, as did a lot of the saints and the prophets, and some of them went into caves, as we know. And only when they came back to their community with a fresh perspective were they able to really heal, help the poor, the needy, the orphans, the widows, the people who really need that help. And for me as a scholar, it was a pure privilege and pleasure to get to know all these wonderful 10 communities, these wonderful faiths and their beloved prophets and saints.
You know, listening to you, and after you have written the book, I'm sure it was time consuming. How has the book been received by people in academic circles and others who have read the book? Because I think, in the end, as I'm listening to you, I'm introspecting, I'm asking myself, how open am I with engaging other people in an authentic way so that I can understand them and they can understand me?
Good question, my brother. So the book has had mainly and widely a positive response. There have been one or two small articles or objections where someone said, "Oh, you went to a church and you didn't, you talked about some priest who didn't give you access because he was, the community is going through a difficult time." And so there was just a voice or two that had the opposite, but very widely and largely, it's had a very, very positive response. The book can be found at the University of Oxford in the library, in the main library, at the University of Cambridge's library, in SOAS, in the British Library, in Pakistan, in many of the organizations and institutions. People own the book privately. When I went there, I was delighted to see the book on many coffee. It was a coffee table book for many tables in the drawing room. So a lot of people do have that openness to see and accept and receive. Because again, like you made that very good point, it doesn't come from me. This is not my voice. This is the voice of the community. And it is rooted, my perspective that as an author is rooted in from the sources. It's rooted in my beloved faith, in my beloved Rasulullah. So it comes from that platform. And so it's meant to reach out, it's meant to build bridges, it's meant to deepen understanding, and it's meant to really appreciate our human family and not, to help remove that toxic hate, because hate really creates bad feelings towards other communities, as does Islamophobia, as does anti Semitism, as does all the hates for other communities. And we've seen time and again that those hatreds easily cause genocide. And it's an awful situation. So, to counter that, the best way is knowledge, the best way is to reach out, the best way is to have a mindset that is inclusive.
You know, I'm reminded as you are speaking, one of my friends, Fuad Nadi, may Allah grant him the highest status in Jannah. And one of the points that he made, that we are living at a time in which it is not so much about conversion, but rather about convergence. And when we see, as it were, the universality and of the values in other people, and that can bring about more harmony and reciprocal understanding. Did you come across that?
Yes, very much so, my brother. And as I said, as an author, I found that as an author, as a believer, as a person, but also a citizen, an ordinary student, I found that I had so much to learn. And because I was in through this research and through this book, I was challenging my own ignorance as well, because in the wider community, for example, the Parsis are seen as fire worshippers, or Buddhists are seen as statue worshippers, or even my own faith is so misunderstood. There's so much Islamophobia, there's so much almost misrepresentation of the faith. So all that was, I was able to, in a very small way, engage in and have a different perspective. So I was able through these beautiful books to see that inclusive face, the other face, not the face that's sometimes represented, or even with, for example, Buddhism or the Parsi faith. It's all not at all like that. It's completely opposite. So sometimes it's the journey within, it's the journey of discovery that you find that you lack knowledge, that I, for example, as an author, previously lacked that knowledge. But through this research, I was able to find out, oh, so it's actually not like that. It is like this, which is much more understandable. Now I understand this dimension or this problem because I worked through it or researched it or heard the perspective of this community
You
and
know,
heard this, read their books.
so sorry, time goes so quickly. Uh, my beloved sister, Allah bless you, look after and protect you. I know we just touched the tip of the iceberg, as it were. I want to wish you well in all your endeavors. I'll be so happy to host you in this country. May Allah protect you and your family. Please convey my profound love and salams to your beloved father. Yes, my beloved listeners, we are listening to Dr. Amina Houti, a incredible human being, an anthropologist, an author, a lecturer, a woman, as I said, of many, many paths. So, inshallah, we look forward to your comments and feedback. This is Idris Kamisa saying, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.